Okay, now let me introduce our guest tonight. So, seated to my left is Bassam Salem, founder and CEO of AtlasRTX. He built the company from the ground up, bootstrapped, recently sold that to the Nice company, is that right? It's called Nice? Okay. Well, Bassam is a very nice person. I've known him for years, so I can't imagine him selling his business to anybody other than somebody called Nice. Um, and he currently serves as the GM at AtlasRTX in that business. So, Bassam, anything you'd like to add to your introduction?
I'm really excited to be here. I've known Asim for a long, long time. He's always been not just smart, but really kind. So thanks for inviting me, Asim.
Okay, and then Bryan Christiansen from Limble, co-founder and CEO. My understanding of what Limble does, it's a modern CMMS. That's a mouthful. Bryan, maintenance management, is that right?
Computerized maintenance management.
Yeah. At one point in time, I studied mechanical engineering. I read something about that, but that was a fading memory at this point. But it's a product that it's in a surprising space. It just tells you there's innovation available everywhere. And I'm very impressed with what you guys have done. I've actually had a chance to see your product. I met Adam a while back. He's shared a lot of what you guys do. And of course, we've had a few conversations as well. So thank you for joining us tonight. Anything you'd like to add about yourself or your company?
Just super excited.
Great, great. Okay, cool. So here's the game plan, you guys. So we're gonna have drinks and hors d'oeuvres served throughout this conversation. We are recording this conversation. It goes onto our website probably in a few days. And there are other conversations similar to this one with founders, with heads of customer success, with CROs that you can find there that are very, very deep conversations about specific topics if you're interested in that. So please do share that with your friends. We're gonna have essentially a very informal fireside chat. And the conversation today is around the role of customer empathy. And I'm going to sit down now. Role of customer empathy as a company progresses through various stages of its life. Day one, founder starts with a piece of paper and tries to find their first customer and convince them that they've got a good idea and they should start working together. And so that becomes your initial design partner. And then you try to scale up to your first 10. And from there to your first 100, and you're seeking that elusive product market fit. Does my product work for the customers that I'm trying to target? And once you get to that stage, then you start to scale up. And at that point, you start bringing in a lot of the smart people that you see in this room to help scale the business and get to where it needs to go. How does the founder's value translate culturally into the organization at that point? And then eventually, you continue to scale and build a business, and it either becomes its own entity or it exits, and then that brings a whole round of changes with that. So we'll talk about the role of customer empathy and how that's important, regardless of whether you're on the product side, the sales side, or customer success side of the business, building the business through various stages. So that's the game plan for tonight. Now, the reason we introduced all of you to each other is because we want you to feel comfortable to just raise your hand and ask a question. Throughout the conversation. And we want it to be interactive. We want it to be fun. We want it to be where we learn from each other and learn from this experience tonight and make some new friends. So does that sound like a good plan? Okay. All right. Sounds good. I do want to introduce my son, Aryan, at the back with the long hair that I'm very jealous of. He is here for spring break. I asked him to join me tonight since I'm dropping him off to the airport in a little bit. But he's here seeking an internship. So anybody has anything that they can offer him for this summer? Okay. So let me get started. I'm going to hand you the mic as we kind of go through this so we can get this on the recording. But every founder has a different story for what motivated them to typically quit their job at a typically good, well-paying company, or leave their college degree halfway through and start something that is really gnawing at them. So we want to hear the origin story. What got you motivated?
So I think it's obvious for me it wasn't dropping out of college at this age. But it was a midlife crisis. For me, there were really three objectives. I was in the midst of sort of a gap year, my millennial moment, even though I'm a Gen Xer. And I had three objectives. Objective number one was to experience being an entrepreneur myself. I had spent so much time advising entrepreneurs and had this sense of false guidance that I was giving. So I really wanted to experience it firsthand. Second, because I'm a data nerd and nerd as well. We all have these perceptions that we work in companies all these years, and we have perspectives and perceptions of what should have happened, how we should have treated people, how you scale, how much you invest in Stan James's sales operations. Why we spend so much on it versus services. So this was an opportunity to say, all right, if I believe I know what the right way to do it is, then I should be able to try that. And then finally, and I mean this sincerely, this is not meant as in any way an attempt to just pat the vision or mission on the back. It was so important to me to sort of recognize that there are a lot of personality types that don't typically make it in corporate America. A lot of demographic segments that don't make it in corporate America. So it was really important to me, even though we're a small company, to sort of make a difference there and to bring in those who were different. And that was the genesis. And you notice in none of this did I talk about the product or the idea, because that came after that, and that's very sincere.
Yeah.
Stop there.
And maybe share about the product.
The product now
Yeah.
is what we call a digital workforce, so very fancy chatbots, digital assistants, primarily for marketing and sales, although we do have some service use cases. And, we now power some of the largest home builder websites in the country. So if you go to a home builder website like D.R. Horton, KB Home, Taylor Morrison, Beazer, and you see a digital assistant that can chat with you and can help you find a home, that's actually an Atlas-powered digital assistant that has live data and can answer questions with live interactions.
Okay, so Bryan Christiansen, how I got into entrepreneurship. I was a kid selling candy bars at school to the bane of all dentists, right? So my father actually ingrained it into me very, very, very early on. I had no idea what he was doing, but he's basically, from an early age, raised me to be an entrepreneur. And again, in elementary school, I did it. In high school, I got work released to go play video games because I turned that into a business. And I was like, entrepreneurship rocks. Like, this is amazing. And then I actually grew up, and I had a really serious conversation with my dad around the age 26. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life and how to actually make an impact in the world. And he's like, you could be an attorney like me. Like, that's a great job. Helped a lot of people. You could go on and be a doctor. There's a lot of things that you could do. And he then brought up the fact that the people that he's seen change the world the best for the positive way is entrepreneurs. The businesses they create bring so much good to the customers if you do it the right way, but more importantly to your employees and your team members. You have real control over the quality of life because you get to basically decide for half of their waking hours the type of environment they're in. And so after having a really, really deep, serious conversation with him, I was like, well, you basically raised me to be an entrepreneur. Like, this has been a 26-year plan. Like, thanks, Dad. I don't know if I have a choice. Like, it's in my DNA. And so I set out to build companies. And my dad's right. He's always right. It's kind of frustrating when your dad's always right. It's not supposed to happen. But anyways, set out and started building companies for about the next 12 years, and to where I'm at today. Made a lot of mistakes, had a startup that failed, but the company today is called Limble. We are maintenance management software. For example, the Hogle Zoo uses us to make sure their facilities are well run. Thanksgiving Point uses us for the same thing. The shampoo, hopefully all of you use today, was probably made in a plant that was running our software to keep the production lines going. Target uses us. Avis is about to. Basically everywhere has things that break. Our software helps keep the world running. We like to say we empower the unsung heroes that support the world. And that's both true for our customers, but then also our employees like Adam over here. So that's a little bit about me.
Okay, so that kind of gives you a little bit of a flavor for where these two gentlemen are coming from. I'll share a little bit of my story as we kind of go through this as well. I was actually at Omniture for a couple of years and moved here from the Bay Area to live in Park City. Worked for Omniture, had a great time, first time exposed to what data problems look like. And a couple years later, that business exited Adobe, so I, didn't intend to, but ended up staying for another 10 years building that business up. What I realized at the end of that 10 years is there were some problems that were so vexing and so frustrating that I couldn't solve in the context of a big company. And I've got to go quit and do this elsewhere. And elsewhere turned out to be Immersa, which my co-founder and I started together. And he was essentially dealing with the same problem at his previous startup, which had scaled up to a few hundred people and needed some help. So that's how we connected, and that's how we got Immersa started. And the problem that we were looking at was, how do I take, we as executives at companies kind of sit in front of these dashboards and look at KPIs and, work with some of my friends at this side of the table who would present that information to me. And it was very useful data, but when you turn around and say, well, now let's go do something different as a sales team, as a CS team, as a marketing team. You've got hundreds of employees in different parts of the organization that are using different tools, have no idea what the dashboard says, don't care, because their day-to-day operations run on specific accounts, specific interactions with people in those accounts, and the two systems don't talk at all. So the core insight was, how do you operationalize business intelligence? That's how Immersa started. I'm going to keep moving on. If you have a question about any of this or any of us, just ask, raise your hand, and we'll hand you the mic. Okay. So finding the first customer. So both of you, I know, have been in this for a while. I want you to kind of go back in your mind how you found that first customer. Our first customer was in Utah, Cloud App, that I'm hoping they'll still join us tonight. I know there was some family emergencies that came up. But, and I'll share the story on how we found them. But I'm curious how you found your first customers.
For me, it all started, I wasn't a marketer, so I leveraged my network of friends. Can I show you this concept? Can I show you this minimum viable product and get your take? And then it's amazing how when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So I ran into all sorts of things that we could address with these digital assistants in 2016. But I think I so appreciate at this point the importance of people who want you to succeed. The number one factor that made our company succeed is there were so many people outside the walls of the company that supported it and were willing to give things a try. There's no way we would be here had we not had that.
So, first design partner or first paying customer?
First design partner. That's good point.
Yeah, so I'll cover both quick. So first design partner, even a blind pig finds an acorn, right? So it was a lot of cold calling, honestly, and I'm an engineer. Cold calling scares the shit out of me. But I was damn determined, and to understand this, I was the CTO of a company for 5 years before that, of a startup that had no customers. And so I dealt with business partners that were supposed to go get the deals and never did. And so I just came off of that and decided I'm going to make my own company and I'm going to learn how to do it all. That way I don't rely on anyone. And the first step was find people to talk to. And so I just literally picked up the phone and started calling. And it was like, hi, I want to build software. I'm really good. I learned a lot. But yeah, I got the first one, ironically, not from the cold calls. I was just about to give up. And I came across an association called the International Facility Management Association, which you're aware of. You know everyone in Utah, though, so it's not surprising. But I remember being like, you know what? I'm just going to go to their office. They have to talk to me if I go there. And so I get in my car and I drive there, and it's a P.O. box. And I'm like, son of a bitch. So I drive back to the office, and I'm like, I'm giving up. Like, I'm like 2 years into trying to build this. I was 5 years into that and 1 year into just trying to find someone to talk to, actually. That sounded about right. Some of the timelines about that. And so anyways, I get back, and after not that fun day, I decided, you know what, it can't hurt to send an email. I have their email. And so I sent him an email, and the guy goes, you know what, I can send it out to our newsletter. And it was just basically this plea. I just want to write software and solve people's problems. And so he sends it out to the newsletter, and I found the first non-paying customer there. And it was Roger Beck. Do you happen to know Roger? Maybe. Yeah, Roger's amazing. and he's at Intercontinental Hotel Group, and he gave me hope to keep going, and that was the first design partner. The first paying customer took 2.5 years since I started the company. We're kind of slow, not anymore, but in the early days we were. And we actually got them through SEO. So my background is content marketing and full stack engineering. And when I wrote the first line of code, I wrote the first blog, and it just took a while because I really didn't want to cold call. Like, that was not the go-to-market strategy I want. And I understand the irony, Adam, on the fact 1/3 of our company are cold callers today. But anyways, that's how I got the first design partner and the first customer.
Okay, I love hearing these stories. I'll tell you my story a little bit on this. I think it's a little bit along the lines of what you just said. I mean, I had just come out of Adobe. Now, you know, when you're at a big company and you've got a few hundred employees, part of your team, you're not doing the real work, honestly. Like, it's very different. You walk into a startup. My co-founder looks at me and says, I need some data before I can actually build you something. He's obviously the engineering lead in our company. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go to all my friends I know. And I made a trip out to Utah, but 10 different CEOs that I know first name basis. And went and met each of them, and they looked at me strange, like, you want me to give you what now? Our customer data? I'm like, yeah, and your product usage data. And they're like, what are you going to do with that? I'm like, well, I'm going to try and put it together and give you some insights on, who's going to churn and who's going to grow, and that's our idea. And he goes, yeah, I got to talk to my board, and I got to, there's something called SOC 2 that you need to know about. And of course, I'd heard of SOC 2, but I was hoping that we could slide by, but obviously not. So long story short, about a month into this, I realized this is not going to work. This is not going to work. And getting access to data is really the hardest thing to get started. How do we build a product without some real data to work from? So then I got to cold calling, and in cold email, actually, more than cold calling. I'm scared to cold call, as Patrick here will attest. He's tried a few times to get me to make some calls. I'm like, I'm not calling someone unless you first tee it up. But I am very comfortable with cold emails, and I sent out hundreds of emails, people I knew, people I didn't know. And our first customer to sign up was actually a company based here in Utah that we had found through cold calling, Jeff Gomez at CloudApp, who essentially took a chance at us. Like, RevOps guy, had the problem that we were describing, needed to move product usage data into his Salesforce instance for a sales team, was trying to figure it out, and said, all right, I'll give you guys a shot. And we custom built it for him. Like, that's how we did the first 10 design partnerships, were all custom built. And that kind of leads to another interesting problem afterwards we'll talk about, which is how do you actually build a product while you're building custom stuff for your customers to get access to their data. Okay, so I'm going to talk about customer empathy, which is this idea that you need to listen to customers. And there's two schools of thought, right? There's a school of thought where I know what the customer wants, and I'll build it for them. That's how the iPhone happened. If you ask Apple, if they went and asked, what do you need? No one's going to dream up an iPhone, right? And then there's the other school of thought, which is I really need to listen very closely to what my customers are saying and then figure out what to build for them, right? So I'm curious how customer empathy plays and the way that you listen to customers. Bryan, we'll start with you this time first. And think back to the early days, the design partners, right? How do you work with them?
Yeah, you give me a wrench, I'll probably kill someone. I'm not very handy with a wrench at all. In fact, I have a scar from trying to change training wheels on my son's bike. So, no, I listen to customers. I don't know what it's like to be, changing out the compressor on an HVAC or changing out an engine on a whatever. I just simply don't. And so from the early days, it was, I know how to code. I can write amazing code. I just need someone to guide me and show me your problems. Now, that being said, customers do not know how to design software. They're horrible at user experience, like really bad. So there's kind of in the middle of the two camps, honestly, as I look at it. Like you never tell a customer their pains or problems, right? But you don't let them design your product either. And so you have to listen the right way to your customers and really feel what is the real issue here? Like, if I can remove this, what does that do for your life? And when they tell you, oh, it saves me, 5 hours a week, or it makes it so my boss can see the good work I'm doing, or it makes it so I don't have to hire an extra staff, or it makes it so that I save $50,000 on a budget or whatever, then it's like, okay, awesome, we get the result. Now let's dive even deeper and like figure out where it actually breaks, and then you can design software to handle that. But customers just do not know how to design software. They don't know how to design products. Like Steve Jobs, if they let him design like the average person design the iPhone, we wouldn't have it. But so like for me, it's kind of in the middle, honestly.
You know, I was trying to contemplate the two approaches because I certainly can't say I don't listen to customers, but I do take the philosophy that we have to lead the design of the product, the design of the solution. I think, humbly, I would say that I think we need to be really good at listening to customers about the problem, but that we are responsible for designing the solution. So that might be a bit aligned with what you were suggesting, Ryan. Or, yeah, so it's for us, the initial problem in talking to Woodside Homes, for example, and I'm not going to talk about their specific numbers, but a home builder is sort of easy to come up with a use case. If you think about the average home in the U.S. now, it's really expensive. It's $400,000 or $500,000 for a new home. If you sell 1,000 of them a year, that's $500 million a year. Home builders have a funnel, just like we all do. They have leads that come in, and you qualify the leads, and you nurture them, and you hope to turn them into prospects who come visit you and eventually close. Well, if you look at that funnel and you then just increase a conversion rate by 2% or 5% times $500 million, it doesn't take much to make the ROI really sensible. So if we've got a digital assistant that we can deploy over text as a channel, what's one of the problems that you're dealing with that we can tackle? And the problem that we picked, and I think it was a clever one, was in 2016 we had all been transitioning to text over phone calls. Those of you who've been around for a while, most of you here look old enough to remember these years. Do you guys remember when we were talking about why is the rest of the world texting? Why can't they just talk on the phone like we do here in the U.S.? 07, 08, 09. The iPhone really did change that. We'll give credit to the iPhone in North America. We were getting to a point where you could not reach people via phone. And if you come visit a model home, we spent a lot of money getting you to that model home. If I can't convert you, that is brutal. I've now lost hundreds of dollars on the low end, potentially thousands of dollars in marketing to get someone to show up to that model home. So what if I could just, instead of converting 2 out of 10, could I just convert 3 out of 10 by doing text-based follow-up that a digital assistant helps with? So again, we focused on the problem, and then we used the MVP. And it was literally the MVP in that first iteration. We founded the company in January of 2016. We built the MVP in 2.5 months. It was ready about now in March. And our first production message was April 20th. So we literally went to market with the MVP, but we tackled just that problem and did behind-the-scenes work to sort of cobble it all together. But hopefully that gives some perspective on, we sort of listened to the problem, but we came up with a solution.
Okay, so the common theme is listen to the problem, but let's figure out the solution ourselves, because that's what the core competence is from a startup's perspective. Any questions in the room? Let me just pause for a moment. Anything you'd like to ask or share your own story?
I have a question, but it's not necessarily related to the first year topic. I'm just curious, with the acquisition, NICE, how do you take it from where you are? What does NICE want to do with your offering? Is it an expansion of like, your home focus? How are they using your business to expand their offering?
Great. Yeah, so the question is, being acquired by a large company like NICE, which is a big customer experience powerhouse, candidly. They're one of the largest in the world. What's the perspective? What's the take if you have a vertical focus, and what's the implication from an integration perspective? So first, we did take a vertical approach as we went to market. but we have been diversifying. So we have higher education as well. So we work with Vanderbilt, Purdue, Emory. So we have other verticals. It's just that home building has been very dominant for us. Our platform can be applied to lots of vertical use cases, but as most of you, many here are in tech, know, it's best and most effective to tune AI on a particular domain. You can get the best results if you're seeing millions of the same conversations. Well, we can do a really good job. Whereas if they're across the board, they're not as effective. So we have a vertical approach, but it's a horizontal problem that we're all dealing with. And very briefly, with respect to NICE, there are 15 million call center agents around the world. That's the estimate. 15 million people doing either inside sales, service, some customer interaction in a call center environment. And you imagine how that world is going to get disrupted in the next 10 or 15 years, because there are a very large proportion of those conversations are repetitive. They're the same things over and over again. And as you all know, there's also a struggle in the world right now to staff positions like that. So the quality of the conversations in many use cases are not that great with a human. You might think the bar is really, really high because, hey, you're trying to compete against a human, but you're really trying to compete against a human with 100% turnover. You just got this job and just answered the phone, right? Or answered a text or tried to chat with a customer. So I really think that there's going to be sincere disruption in the engagement process over the next decade that will be unprecedented.
Okay, so we'll keep going. Please, again, ask questions as they come up for you. So we were in that journey at that point of how do you find your first few design partners, and then the next step really is that product market fit. For us at Immersa, the story, we've got our first 10 companies essentially through cold calling or cold emails and through our network of people that we knew. And our investor Mayfield helped us a lot with that effort because they have a very wide network that we were able to tap into. And the commitment we made to our first 10 customers is that we're going to charge you anything until we are confident that we can deliver you a productized solution. So we're going to solve your problem. We're going to solve it in a custom way. But until we get to a productized solution that we can deploy for you, we're not going to charge you anything. So some of the first customers that are moving with us in that direction actually signed up with us in a paid plan last quarter, which was introduced about 7 quarters after the company started. So that's how long it took to build out that underlying data platform and some of the capabilities on top. But the key kind of scale phase for a company occurs when you find product market fit. You build something that people need, you know how to go find them, you know how to go pitch them, and when they see your product, they're interested and excited about it. You figured out the ROI story, you figured out the referenceability, and all those things. That is a very interesting journey to get to and to figure out. We're at that stage where we're trying to feel our way to that point. We're getting close. We're not there yet. We understand the problem very well, but we're trying to figure out how do we find more customers like that. But I'm going to, again, start with Bryan, because I believe, Bryan, you may have already scaled past that point, is my understanding.
So just to clarify, the question is, like, how do you get product market fit, or how do you scale past it?
How do you find that?
A lot of effort. Your customers will tell you everything you need to know, how to sell to them, how to support them, how to build for them, how to delight them, how to anger them. They'll tell you everything, and they can be very vocal about it as well. So honestly, it's just talking to your customers a lot. It's one of these weird concepts that's so simple that so many people just miss. Like, talk to your customers. You're building a company for them. A lot of people get distracted. I'm going to build a company to become rich. I'm going to build a company to show that I can do it. It's like, no, you're building a company to serve customers. So talk to them, because if you don't, you won't have a company. And so product market fit really comes when you have a couple of those key signs. So you can think of it as like you're pouring water in a cup, and it doesn't do anything until finally it overflows. And then it's like, oh, I got it. And reality is there's multiple cups that cover different areas. You got to build that product enough until it finally overflows, where it's like, okay, we hit that, right? You have to know the use cases and the value props and all that well enough before you can convince people to actually buy it. And then you need to understand your customers well enough to onboard them so that they actually stay with you. The first startup I did, we actually got a couple customers and they left in a month. We had that third cup that wasn't filled at all. And the product wasn't good enough. That company was kind of not a good company to use as an example, but they taught me a lot. And so anyways, with Limble, like we honestly, one of the things that we did that helped with that third cup is we just made the software. We came onto an established market, and so we weren't trying to like what you're doing is very different. You're having to educate a market. And the first startup I did, I had to educate a market, and I was like, not again. Like, I have no money. It costs a lot of money to educate a market. So I'm going to find an old, crappy market that has tons of competitors that all suck, and I'm going to build something better. So I don't have to actually educate them, like my consumers. I just have to build a really good market. And again, full stack engineer, I knew I could do that, right? Or a really good product, not market. And so some of those cups were already kind of like I had some advantages. I still had to learn a lot of things, and so I had to talk to a lot of customers. But right out of the gate, onboarding them was super easy, and it really just came down to how do I sell to them? How do I get enough confidence that my product is actually good enough? Because it takes a lot of time and energy to set up our product. We actually use Guide CX to help do that, so plug for you. Awesome product. But anyways, for us, it was really about like that first cup, getting the product good enough to get the right product market fit. And then also the content marketing, of course, to get the customers in. And then once we had that, and the customers were giving amazing reviews about the product, there was a lot of word of mouth. There was like our sales reps were able to repeatedly sell it, and we were able to get like a good rhythm. Then things like beautiful things start to happen at that point, and then you really start to scale. And we're basically at that point, or maybe just about past that part now. And so now the next trick is figuring out how to scale past that.
I'll try to be additive because you said so much already, Bryan, but the metaphor I use in my head around product market fit is as I'm pushing, and this is a subjective assessment from an objective sort of guy, am I pushing the snowball up a hill on a flat surface or down a hill? You know, how much energy do I have to put in to get the client to say, or prospective client to say yes? And I think we've all experienced companies where it feels like you're always pushing uphill and it's a directly straight uphill. You know, some it's a little bit shallower, and you then eventually start rolling it. And then we've, hopefully some of us, I mean, Omniture was an example of a company where we had to work hard in sales, but I pointed at Stan, who was critical there, but the ball was rolling away from us, right? We got to a point where we had to keep up. We had to practically keep up with the demand. So as I think about product market fit, I think is the product ready? Is the market educated enough? And gosh, I wish I had listened to you because we had to educate our market. And then it's so tough. And 3, can your team tell the story clearly, concisely, both pre-sales and post-sales? And for our business, in home building, we're certainly not pushing it uphill anymore because we spent a lot of time and money educating that market. Higher education, maybe a year or 2 behind that. So we have to push the ball a bit harder. In other verticals, it's still pretty nascent, although thank goodness for generative AI of late, because now everyone, even lay people, are talking about AI in chat. So that's at least pushing us forward to now start perceiving that, you know what, I could potentially use a machine for a role that 2 years ago would have seemed crazy. That's not there.
Okay, great. Sean, we'll come to your question in just a moment. Hold on to that thought. I think what I heard here is this idea of listening to the customer. We learned this pretty early going into this problem. And to your point, Bryan, there are different markets. So there are markets that are established and you're trying to displace the existing incumbent. That's one type of problem. There's markets where you're trying to promote a new solution. For us, the core insight that we started working off of is we talked to a lot of people. We were in conversations with customers where the business leader that runs revenue or customer success, CRO, RevOps, turn towards their data people or their product people and saying, give me the data. This is what I need. From the product, I need to know how are people actually using it so I can have an intelligent conversation the next time I meet my customer. And the product people are saying, well, you have the data. Here it is. And we're literally sitting there and we can see both points of views and we can see they're talking past each other. Because one understands the business real well, the other understands the data real well, and how do you communicate across? Some people do it well, some teams don't do it that well. And so we saw an opportunity. The opportunity was that empower the business user to get access to the data so they can iterate on it on their own and not have to depend on the data team to do that for them each time. And that insight really helped define the first real paying customers for us. And part of that process was actually looking at the first dozen or so design partners that we had signed up. Are they now the right fit for what we're building? And in some cases, even though we solved the problem that they asked us to solve for, they may not be the right long-term customer for us. So they'll still stay with us as long as they need to. But we are continuously seeking that conversation to understand from different directions, what does this problem look like? And how do we solve it in a different way? But the core insight for us is empower the business user to work with data, because that, unfortunately, is not the case quite yet. Companies have a lot of data, but they still have a lot of bottlenecks on how to actually translate that into business. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Sean to ask the question he's been very patiently waiting for.
No, so my question is, what data points are you looking at to specifically find that product market fit or that ideal customer profile?
Yeah. So, yeah, you asked a really good question. The word ICP, ideal customer profile, sort of comes into vocabulary in that sense. Look, what we found is for customers that actually used our product, if they weren't paying us, we went back to them and said, are you okay if we turn it off? And they said, absolutely not. And so in some situations, what we find is that they're not able to pay at that point, but they're still using the product. They want to get to a point where they can pay for it. So to me, that reflects product market fit in the sense that if you start a 30-day POC, at the end of the POC, you turn the product off. Does the customer scream at you because they want access, or do they not care? And that's a good indicator of whether or not you have product market fit. There's other ways. I'll let the gentleman to my left speak.
The first time I realized I really had it, I crashed one of the portals where people would submit problems and the customers freaked out. And I was like, okay, yeah, same concept. They're very reliant on this. Holy cow, maybe I really do got something. Like this is awesome. So yeah, that's a quick and dirty way that doesn't cost you anything except your brand, apparently. And you're so young, you can still work through your brand at that point because you only have like 10 customers. So like real KPIs though, I mean, they're basic feature utilization logins. I remember being terrified because one of my the first design partners, honestly, was not logging into the tool, and they told me they were loving it. And I was looking at it and I'm like, you haven't logged in a week, and I don't want to call them a liar. And so I'm sitting there like, I'm so grateful for everything you're giving me, but like not using the damn tool. There's no way that we're fit. And so I kept asking more and more and more and more questions. And so like usage inside your tool, you should track it as quickly as possible, because that doesn't lie. And your customers will, even if they're really nice and they want to help you, right? Like there's advice like don't have your mom buy your product or whatever, because she's never going to tell you that it's ugly, right? But numbers don't lie. So track usage, right? We actually just filled our VP of Success role, and so I had the pleasure of interviewing maybe 100 candidates and got to explore the setup of success amongst a lot of companies. And honestly, it was extremely shocking how few actually had feature utilization or product usage. It was like mind blowing that it's like you're in charge of an entire department to see how well to make sure your customers succeed. And I ask you, what's the core thing they do in your product that gives them value? And you go, I don't know. And it's like, you're not tracking this? Like you're insane. And so anyways, we did this from the very, very, very beginning because that helped us find product market fit. And so, are they logging into the tool? And in our case, are they completing work orders? Are they adding pieces of equipment? Are they purchasing spare parts? Because we know if they do that, based on the feedback from them with the pain points, that it's like, yeah, we're going to save you a ridiculous amount of time and money and all of that. Another amazing metric, and it's just a normal metric, is what are they paying you? If they're going to pay you a lot of money, they normally like your software, right? But yeah, I mean, like I try and stick to like hardcore numbers, not them telling you I love it. Like NPS scores, honestly, in my opinion, are kind of crap. Like maybe the guy's dog died that morning, and so you get a bad one, or the girl he loves, said yes, and then you get a great one. It's like that has nothing to do with Limble, and we appreciate your great or hate you for your bad score, but that doesn't help us operationalize our company. So yeah, I mean, it's KPIs that honestly they don't really see, like logins and what they're doing. So you're kind of watching them without them realizing you're watching you, without them realizing that you're watching them. Tends to get the non-biased information. So yeah, don't trust NPS.
I actually did a webinar exactly on that topic. Can you trust your NPS score? And is there a better way to do this? And 100% agree with what you just said. For the same reasons that you just described. Okay. Yeah.
So, one question, since some of you have also been at larger organizations, what lessons have you learned as entrepreneurs post large organizations that you would give advice to people at large organizations or to yourself back at your old job?
Great question. So the question is, for those of you who didn't catch that, is a couple of us have been at larger companies. What advice, having being entrepreneurs, what advice would we give to ourselves in that role today? So, Bassam, what are your thoughts?
I'm trying to think of what I can say that is going to get recorded.
Remember, it's advice to you.
You need me to hit pause here?
Yeah, if we could pause for a second. It's brutal. It's brutal. I'll be blunt about this. I really, really believe in the veritability of Price's law. That the bigger a company is, the smaller the proportion of people who are adding meaningful value. It's tough to see when you get used to the pace at 10 people, where everybody matters, to the pace at 100, where suddenly we all accept that a third are probably, if we lost them, we'd be okay. It'd be tough, but we'd be okay. Then you're at 1,000, and you could probably lose 500 people, and you'd be okay. And it just gets worse. And it's brutal because when you really start believing that, and I didn't really see it until I went through this journey, it's really tough. It's really tough. You sort of click this thing in your head where you're like, you hold a higher bar after being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, go ahead.
So just to make sure, the advice, if you work in a big soulless company, what you should do, find a big company that has a damn soul. Like our company, we need every single person. We're at 158. And so find a good company. They're rare, they're out there. And if a third of your company's not needed, then the company's being mismanaged. And that's why there's damn layoffs going on. So entrepreneurs need to step up their damn game and run good companies and be freaking responsible. And I'm a little irritated. I hate hearing that so much. It's so irresponsible.
Bryan, how do you really feel? Tell us.
You see all these layoffs. I'm talking with all these people that are terrified of losing their jobs.
Yeah.
It's just so insane.
Yep.
Anyways, yeah, find a good company.
Yeah, no, I look, good points. I'll most of my career, with the exception of Omniture, which when I joined was probably about 500 people, so that's not even that small. It's a fairly decent sized company. But Oracle, which I left, had scaled up to 80,000 people by the time I left, and Adobe, by the time I left, had scaled up to about 25,000 people. And the Omniture business unit had become a $3 billion business inside of Adobe. And you see the difference. When you start at Omniture, or even earlier, I hear some of the stories from the folks who were there before me, and I see it now at Immersa. As you go through each stage, right? There's no place to hide, and there are the highs and lows, right? You see, everybody's vested into the success of the business because they recognize that if you don't put in your best foot forward today, you're not going to have a company to run for very long. That's just the reality of a startup. And so there's no place to hide, and we make decisions fast. We look at the data, analyze it, understand it, and then we start a new experiment and test it out and go. unfortunately, the reality of a big company, there are so many external pressures on a public company at that scale, and you know, litigation risk, and I mean, just you can just go on and on and on that constrains you as an executive to what you can actually do. So that's sort of one of the things that you kind of lose the. If I don't show up today, will this company live? Like that goes away for the majority of people in a big company. That's not their motivating driving factor. So then you have to figure out, well, what is it that motivates people at that level, and how do you spark that motivation, keep it going? And it's a very different problem than, you know, Lina scheduled 7 meetings for me tomorrow with customers, and that's a high for me in my day, in my week, in my month. That is going to make or break the company as we go forward. That's not how it works when we were working together. Like, you know, a lot of deals just fell apart. Nobody cared because it was just data in a spreadsheet. So that's what the second thing I think that's very different in a big company is trying to get good information, good understanding of what's really going on. You get so much crap information. Regardless, I'm not talking about systems and data and dashboards and KPIs. That's all fine. The politics, the layers of management, the people protecting their turfs, and like, what's your real motivation to give me this answer versus what I'm looking for? You have to peel that apart and you have to figure it out. And that's a very different skill set than at a startup where it's all transparent. You know, if somebody says this is what it is, you take them at face value, you make a decision based off of it, and you go. So what I would tell myself is get your fingernails dirty as an exec at a big company. Some people do it well, some don't. I could have done it better. Okay, so I want to talk about, you know, as you start to scale up your companies, and you've mentioned just now in terms of scale 150 some people in the company, and you've recently exited the business to a bigger company, so obviously you got to a certain scale to be able to do that. How do you know, what are some of the unique things that you did as you made that transition and started hiring employees and scaling it up? What was the top 2 or 3 factors that you were thinking of as you were doing that?
So to scale a company, well, to scale people, I can't remember who gave me this advice. I wish I did because I would shake his hand and probably kiss him. But yeah, it's all about culture, right? You talk about a lot of the problems that you're just talking about there, losing transparency. We have transparency with 150 people because that is a core value, and we beat it into everyone's head, just like all the other core values. So if you want to scale people, it's culture. And you need to do that based on who you are, not who you aspire to be. And so as a founder of a company, you will set the DNA of that company. And if you say core values that aren't you, then you're going to have a really hard time living that. And everyone sees you. They see what you do. And if you're not transparent, no one's ever seen me lie. Right? No one's ever seen me not be open. When on company meetings, I admit fault. Like, I really screwed up here, team. Everyone sees that it's okay to make mistakes, right? And so if you're scaling people, it's all based about culture. And so when we were at about 4 people, we actually wrote it all down, and we put it to words, and we wrote out descriptions, and we actually made hiring grading rubrics to go off of that. And every conversation is around, are they following the culture? Because that will head off so many problems in the future. So culture is a gigantic thing, and there's a lot of things that you can do to support culture. Like, we have a monthly meeting called Why We Do What We Do, where we go over and show a customer like all of the great things that we do for the customer, and that really supports our customer obsessed core value. But then we also have the team impacts, like how did we help change a person's life here, and that one is supporting our one team core value. And that is, like, there's so many great stories there. We've had a lot of really emotional stories, but they're like great stories on how an SDR became an AE and at the age of 21 bought her house and quit college. And I was like, holy cow, like, this is amazing. She's now making like 150 grand a year at 21. I wish I was doing that. You know, like, her life is significantly improved because she came and worked her butt off here. But there's also been some very emotional team impact ones where just allowing our employees to like focus on mental health helped an employee get through when her brother died, and that's a whole big emotional story I won't go into. But when you have them getting up and speaking in front of the team and the company, it can really motivate them and really inspire them to live that culture, and then you have everyone doing it. And so scaling a company is so much about culture, because the people are the ones that build the product. The people are the ones that help the customer. The people are the ones that sell the product. The people are the ones that market. So if you have great people and a great culture, all of your problems tend to get magically solved. They don't get magically solved. They get solved by your great people. And then as a founder CEO, you're kind of like, I can't believe this is still working. And it is, because you have great people and great culture. And so that's the main one. It's just culture, culture, culture.
I couldn't agree more, and I have to be intellectually honest and tell you that I would have said that 7.5 years ago before I was an entrepreneur, but now I believe it, because it's such a popular thing to say, right? But when you're a founder, you freaking realize that every good thing that happens to you is because of your people, and every crappy thing and every sleepless night is because of people. It's crazy. I did love your point, Brian, about I can't remember how you said it, but you have to hire for it. You can't educate it. You can't stick posters up that say, be whatever, and that doesn't change people. So I love the point you made, and you hire for it. I think the one nuance I'll add is, I think instead of describing the culture in terms of behavior, we had really great success identifying 3 or 4, in our case 4 characteristics, that if we can describe the candidate with these 4 characteristics, if that is who they are, and therefore we can sort of gauge that quickly because you meet them. And for us, they were happy, humble, and hungry. And we added horsepower as our fourth H to sort of account for intellectual capacity. But it's really easy to meet someone and say, are they a happy, positive, energizing person? We all know those people. They walk into a room and it lights up. I wish I were that, but I love those people, so I need more of those. You can read humility within minutes of talking to someone. Nobody likes a know-it-all. No one wants to deal with a know-it-all, and you can't beat a know-it-all into humility. They're just a know-it-all. So you have to look for that person who comes in with humility. And then it is hard to assess hunger for us in an interview, although we have little tricks of the trade that I can't put here. But we all, if you're a founder, you want every one of your 153 people to be committed, like you were saying, Steve, and you can sort of gauge that. It is tougher, but my point again is sort of identifying those 3 or 4 traits that we can all remember really easily. We can all say that was not a very happy thing to do, and then we can recognize that and sort of create our own vernacular when we describe one of the 3 or 4 things that we can memorize. Stop that.
There was one other thing about scaling people. When you're hiring, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. That's a lesson that we've learned repeatedly over the years. And so if you're not crazy excited about them, even though your boss is telling you need to hire, you're understaffed, you need to hire, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. And we've made so many mistakes where we're like, okay, yeah, they're good, right? And then, stuff blows up later. So if you're not super excited about the candidate, don't hire.
Yeah. So I'll share my experience as well in the light of the same question, and then we'll have one more question. We'll wrap it up so you can get to your dinner. I think for us, having been at large companies, the culture is somewhat industrialized. Like, you're told what the culture is, and the system sort of filters itself out. People who mold to that culture and people who don't. The difference with a startup is the first 10, 20 employees, which is sort of where we are, about 20 employees right now, actually define the culture. We didn't come into this saying we know what the culture should be. We came in with a point of view and said there's a few things, core values that are important. One of them is feedback is a gift. So we will go into an account from 6 different directions to understand what is it that they're really trying to solve for. And we'll try to get opinions from multiple directions to figure out how people are trying to solve the problem. And we get in front of the customer to understand, well, tell us what's wrong. Tell us why we suck. We ask that question all the time. What would you have us do different? So internally, but each other, my co-founder and I go for a walk every Wednesday afternoon at 4 o'clock. That's our sacred time. And that's where we openly talk dude, you did this, you did that. And that's completely safe zone where each of us can give feedback to the other and be very, very confident that it stays in the safe zone. You do not want to be an employee in that moment next to us because we're super transparent and that's the way we feel like we can grow the company. So transparency is a core value because if you don't have transparency, like I tell everybody in our company, every time we do a board meeting, which happens at least once a quarter, sometimes more often, we come back and we give all the feedback we heard from the board, we give it back to the team. Good, bad, ugly, whatever it is. And it's not always good, right? So people process things differently. Some people get scared. Some people walk away. Some people get excited by those challenges. I'm confident that we can build a great business and hope that everybody else sees that. But I think it's so important to be transparent about where you are so people can focus on the right problems and help you fix them. And then the last thing I'll say is, given where I am in my journey, like most people start when an entrepreneurship journey when they're where Bryan is today, 12 years in. I chose to start at the tail end of my career into this. And so for me, there's a big motivation to give back. I'm looking for those young, hungry, willing to get stuff done employees who haven't proven themselves yet, but have that hunger and the desire to prove themselves so we can help them grow as the business grows. To me, that's part of the give back. Like you get to work with some really smart people and we help you coach through your journey in your career. And the thing I'll say about that is that I think people don't really understand what they're capable of until they're put to the test and put to the fire. So part of what we try to do is to create the right fires to what they can push themselves through. And you'll be surprised how often people step up to it and look back and say, wow, that was pretty amazing. So I think that's how companies are built around stories, and those are the stories we look for and continue to build a culture in that way. But we're not going and assuming we know what the culture is yet because we're defining it together. Okay, I'm going to ask you the last question, and this one's so I want you, if you want to take a moment to think it through, take a moment to think it through. The question is, as a founder, if you had to do something different looking back at your journey, what's the one thing that you would do different?
Did a lot.
One thing. That's why I said take a moment.
I'm trying to think of what's the best one. Hire Adam sooner.
Oh, I could have told you that.
I probably would have gone harder core and sooner. I didn't live off top ramen. Like I was working a job while doing it, and it took too long in the early days because I was. I mean, honestly, I was going fast. I mean, I was working like 12, 14-hour days, but a lot of that time was spent doing a normal job. I probably should have quit the job earlier, honestly. So yeah, quit your jobs.
I think not your team at least.
Not you.
I think for me, as I think about my situation now, if I can be vulnerable, I'd say that I have a lot of personal deferred maintenance, physically, mentally. You work hard. You've been doing it for 12 years. You said. So you forego a lot of things. You eat things that I didn't used to be okay eating, and you stress about things that are now new, and you let yourself. For me, you haven't. I let myself go, and after 7.5 years, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was a heavy price to pay. So if I were to go back, I would somehow know what the outcome would be, and I would prioritize the heck out of physical and mental health every week, every day, so it doesn't take a toll.
Yeah, I think you stole, both of you said the thing I would have said, which is, if I had to do it again, I would have started 10, 15 years ago. This demands a different level of intensity of a person, of a human, to sort of get it going from scratch. The first few years are brutal. And I've been following Bassam's journey for a while, so in fact, he doesn't know this, but inspired me to take my first step to leave a well-paying job at Adobe and step into what I'm doing now. But what I learned in this process, 2.5 years into it, 3 years into it now, you've got to take care of yourself. And to me, those are the little things. Mental health, physical health. you guys have been following the SVB crisis, I'm sure, Silicon Valley Bank. Our first bank that we banked with was Silicon Valley Bank. I hired a CFO last year to help us manage, fractional CFO to help us manage our money. He brought in a different bank that was not as well known and suggested we work with them because they gave us a better deal on the number of services we need. So we moved most of our money there, but we still kept some of our money with Silicon Valley Bank. December, they came back with a better deal. We transferred everything over to them. Wednesday night, when things start to pop up on SVB, I'm like, thank goodness I'm not a part of this anymore. It's only like 2 months ago that I'd moved everything over. And, you know, part of this, like as the crisis escalated, by Friday evening, it was clear that this was going to affect other banks as well. There's going to be a run on multiple banks. There was a run on multiple banks over the weekend, but the FDIC stepped in and put a stop to all that. But Monday morning, the bank we were banking with dropped 65% in their stock value, and it went on what is basically a stock trade pause, which, you know, 7 a.m. from here in Utah, I'm calling my banker in California at 6 a.m. saying, dude, what's going on? We need to pull some money out. And so we pulled out 3 months of payroll that morning into my personal account because we don't have any place else after we got a board to sign off on that. You know, this is the life of my intention this week was to spend some time with my son skiing and spend some time with you guys and meet a few clients while I'm here. But my life was turning out to be very different. But as I was going through all of this, the commitment I made is we came here to ski, we're gonna go ski. It may not be the entire day, and like, you know, I've got to get away out of my own headspace and do what we need to do to keep ourselves healthy. And company's fine, our money's fine, the bank is fine, all that's behind us. But it was 1 week of intensity that, and you know, something new happens every day. And it's always life or death. And so you get used to that eventually and are like, yep, I still got to go to the gym, I still got to go ski, I still got to go see my family. It is what it is. And we'll live again tomorrow, we'll figure it out. So that's, I think, such an important thing. It took me a long time. In a corporate job, there's intensity, but it's different. You can still steal some time to do what you want to do, but in a founder's role, it's really hard to make that call because there's always something else that you could be doing for your company. Okay, so I'm going to pause there. Any final questions from the audience? Yes.
And I'm just curious, I'm with the opposite route. I was sort of early stage founder type person going into an executive role at a later stage company. What does a founder look for at a later stage company in an executive partner to sort of take that burden off of you and share it with you in a way that's
Great question, Greg.
So I just hired 2 execs. So yeah, I walked down this path really closely, just barely. So by far is like their communication skills, right? So well, first is culture fit. So again, goes back like that's a given. But after that, their communication and how they're going to fit into your team, the relationships that your executive team that will form will make or break on how well they work together. And those relationships is mostly around communication. It's like, are they actually going to go get drinks together and be friends, or are they just going to be work buddies that hate each other? It's like, no, we're not having that. And so when we found the right executives, their interpersonal skills, the communication skills, how easy it is to just get along with them, all that was super, super important. Because if they don't like working together, they're not going to work together well. So that's super, super critical. The next thing is being data focused and understanding how to use data to motivate people, because they're going to be managing large groups of people and setting up systems and all of that, and they need to understand like how numbers work. At least in our company, like that's like in all companies, honestly, it's important. But in our company, we're insanely data focused. Like we watch 1,600 KPIs on that I watch just on all the departments. So if they can't speak my language and data, then I can't work with them. So those 2 things. So culture, getting along with the other executives to the point where they're basically going to be friends. Extremely data focused. Understand the difference between leading and management. That's a great question to ask. What's the difference between a leader and a manager? You know, if they understand that, that's a great sign. If they understand how to hire people, if they understand how to fire people, You learn a lot about people by just asking them to tell them about what they've built. So I mentioned earlier about asking VP of successes, like, tell me about your department. Like, how does it work? Why did you make this decision? What went right? What went wrong? And you can see how they think and how they explain things. And then you start checking off the other boxes. They're good communicators. They're straight to the point, yada, yada, yada. And so those are some of the key things that I look for in executives. And when you get that, then so many problems just get solved. Because they're data focused, they can play well with others, they can lead people, they can manage people, they're following all the core values. I mean, I can't really ask for much more than that for my executives.
I think, Greg, that was a great question. I would add a little bit to that to say that startups, mature companies, sort of different stages of growth require different type of skills from their executives in order to get to the next level. So at our stage, we need people who, I mean, at every stage, you need people who communicate well and are willing to, give it their all. But at our stage, what we also need is people who are willing to wear multiple hats. Like, I'm not going to be able to hire a customer success person and a salesperson and a whatever else. It's like, can the same person do that, and can we move them in that direction they want to go as the company scales? So those are the kinds of trade-offs that we have to make. We look for people who are comfortable in that scenario to say, yeah, this is what I'm supposed to do, but I also understand that today it's different and the company's a different place and we made this left turn or that right turn, and so therefore we got to go do that. I think at later stages, when you get to mid-stage companies and growth scale companies, there's another different type of executive or different type of individual that works well there. And then, the Fortune 500 or the Global 2000 companies are very different skill sets. An important part of being successful is recognizing what's your strength. Because a lot of people I've seen beat themselves up for not succeeding to their own expectations when they put themselves in a position that they were not designed for. And I think recognizing that is really, really important before you step into something new. Okay, we're going to wrap here for the evening. I really want to thank my two guests for joining us tonight and making time for us today. We have some gifts for you on the way out that you're welcome to please take those with you. But a round of applause, please.